All right, hey folks, we got 18 minutes and I'm gonna be respectful and get through this, hopefully pretty quick. 5:27:3, that's the reason I'm not wearing a suit today. Any ideas what that means? I mean, there's no reason why you'd know it, but we can do that thing that we all did in high school math where we had to figure out what the patterns were. That's, oh my goodness, how about I turn that on? That's 5 airports, 27 hours, and 3 New Yorks. That's New York City, and of course, New York, New York. All right, so I was on the East Coast, got stuck behind all those thunderstorms yesterday, and my bags are en route, so I had my t-shirt in my backpack. That was my clothes for today, and I apologize to you for not being dressed up more for this discussion, but this discussion is about risk tolerance, and actually, as I was going through that whole process, nothing probably puts as fine a point on risk tolerance as yesterday's situation with me and the airlines. And it occurred to me as I was flying that risk is somewhat inversely related to system fragility, right? We don't accept an airline system that is highly fragile. We don't want planes to fall out of the sky. And so what we do is we take risk tolerance and drive that almost all the way down to 0. If planes aren't gonna fall out of the sky, we're gonna have high regulatory threshold. If people are gonna make these connecting flights, then something like a thunderstorm is gonna delay people. They're not gonna get their clothes. It's an interesting metaphor that actually crosses over very well into governance. And so when we talk about risk, your government and airlines, they're kind of related. And this is something I want you to keep coming back to as we go through our short discussion today, is what's the interplay between risk and efficiency? And really, in a lot of cases, why risk tolerance being very low creates inefficient processes, and what solutions can we create utilizing emerging tools to maybe make things a little bit more flexible. And so we're talking about procedure. Of course, waiting in lines, waiting in the DMV, waiting for something to get done. We're all familiar with that. A little about me, I'm also the CEO of Inquisio.Ai, so I am here for personal reasons as well. But I'm the mayor of the city of Orting, Washington. And so when I speak about policy, just like the last guy spoke about policy, it is going to be a very important aspect of this discussion around marketing our various products and ideas and bringing them to market in the future. All right, so as the mayor of Orting, I oversee policy and the policy environment for a city of about 10,000 people. Policy is a very important thing that we want to talk about because it's going to be an emerging thing it's going to be an emerging part of our discussion about productizing our things. But policy is also an interesting beast. A lot of the policies, a lot of the rules that we live every day are because of something that happened 10, 20, 30 years ago. When you go through the airport and you have to take off your shoes and take off your belt, we know it's because of something that happened 10, 20, almost 30 years ago in some cases. So the policies that we live by took a while to implement, and they have long legs once they get implemented. Los Angeles has this vestigial policy: you can't wash your neighbor's car without permission. Obviously, it's silly. It's not implemented most of the time. Denver, you're not allowed to drive a black car on Sundays. And the county of Hawaii on the great island of Kona has an ordinance amending Chapter 19, Article 13, Section 19104 of the Hawaii County Code that you can't have loud laughing in public. Are you guys aware of this policy? They want to keep everything to aloha. No? Okay. On that note, I'm the father of 4, so dad jokes are part of my way of being. And being the mayor of a city, I am keenly aware of the problems my city has. My teenager tells me every day. But in our code too are some really silly vestigial things that were written 50, 60, 70 years ago. For instance, Orting Municipal Code 61B16, silly string and stink bombs are prohibited. That was written in 1972. I don't even know why. I was born in 1982. So I do know that we sell stink bomb, or we sell silly string at our local Safeway, and that's kind of my thing over their head in case they ever upset me, is we'll send in the cops and confiscate everything and fine them. But when I was looking at the municipal code, here's the code section that speaks to it. An interesting thing jumped out at me, and this is after we at Inquisio have been looking at other municipal codes and ways to, I'd say, democratize it, but make people be able to access those codes in their language, their level of understanding. The enforcement relies on the chief of police or his designee, and he's authorized, here, I'll make it bigger, he's authorized to take any and all action. And so you could see, well, it's hard to ask open-ended questions up here, but language like that's problematic, and it speaks to the point that unless we're defining a new industry, we are going to be grappling with the baggage of an old industry. So as we're implementing AI in whatever industry we're in, whether it's healthcare, government, or some other thing, there are going to be vestigial policy decisions that were made 30, 40, 50 years ago that are going to be part of your ability to productize your idea. And the same is true in governance, and that drives a lot of the conversation we have at Inquisio.Ai, where we leverage emerging AI models to make government better. And we're not talking about the federal government. Let's forget about them. I can't make them better. But states, counties, cities, school districts, we can do a lot at that level to connect people with solutions. So where does AI fit into this? I've just given you a primer on local government and policy. Here's a couple ways that those of you that are developing AI solutions, those of you that are looking at getting your product into a market or maybe opening up new markets, I'm not trying to chase people out of government tech. I want all of you in GovTech because I want this to be efficient and to work well. So here are some sample use cases. We have, in any city that you have a chamber of commerce. Any community, you have a chamber of commerce. And in our particular chamber of commerce, they want us to read proclamations and welcome new businesses to the community. I find that to be a challenge because writing a new proclamation requires time, effort, an hour, 2 hours, getting the language right. And so it's really about structuring questions, which is a conversation a lot of you are working through, is how do you structure questions and data input to get the output that you need? Here's one sample use case. Through 6 structured questions, you can start to develop policy that works in any government space. And this is a simple proclamation by the Mayor of Orting welcoming a new judo and jiu-jitsu studio into the city that I live in. Let's see. Here's another sample use case, maybe something with a little bit more meat on its bones. This is exploring housing policy. On the West Coast and perhaps everywhere, housing policy is a very big issue. We have more demand than we have supply. It's driving up the costs, and it's driving up the costs unequally across the spectrum as far as income goes. And so housing policy is a big issue, but the number of policy creatives in this is small, the expertise is lagging, and the practical implementation of policy is lagging. And so how do we utilize it in this space? And it's again about structuring questions. This case is slightly different. You're not necessarily talking about interacting with a LLM like ChatGPT. You're utilizing API calls and keeping things in short-term memory, more or less. And there's a number of solutions probably outside this room right now where folks are doing the same thing, where you can create a structured query along a chain of questions, review affordable housing policies across the state, review the City of Orting's policies, determine if an affordable housing policy exists, and if there isn't one, draft one. So now you get this open-ended kind of discussion with a tool that the tool doesn't know anything about housing, but neither does your intern. Neither does probably most people on your staff, but it's still your job in the government to try to create a policy around it, create a framework for businesses, for developers to come in, build something that works for everyone. And so utilizing some tools off the shelf right now, you can save governments, you can productize this and save governments days or even weeks of research and synthesizing information. Is this ready to be passed? No. But does it create the framework that saves people time? Absolutely, because it's the same process that people have to go through when they're trying to explore the issues too. And so, AI is a great tool right now as it is, even off the shelf with a little bit of massaging to help people jump, days and weeks ahead of where they are already in their process. And then this is our use case at Inquisio. It's the public records problem. And I don't know if folks know what the public records problem. But if you've ever tried to develop a property for, say, you want to put up a new business, or if you've ever tried to research grants, or if you've ever had any conflict with government in any particular situation, it comes back to the public records problem. And not to put too fine of a point on it, but we suck at solving public records in government. Every single government you work with sucks at solving it. Whether you're trying to get stuff for developing properties, building a business, whether you're trying to get body camera footage for an interaction with police officers, whether you're trying to get information from your school district. A good example, the city of 10,000 people, you can almost expect that they have 4 to 5 staff members out of 50 whose job it is on a very regular basis to manage public records. 10% of the staff in many cities, many jurisdictions, manages public records, and that's recording records. So anything that is generated by a government is a record. So recording records, retaining them, and then reproducing them at request. It's a house fire. And here's part of the problem, is that the process right now is full of everything white is a point of failure, everything orange is a moral hazard problem, where the person responsible might be the person who gets in trouble by producing the public records request. And so you can see the process is highly inefficient. It's created in such a way where 5 or 6 people have to review every single thing to drive that risk tolerance down to 0, because government knows itself that there's a moral hazard problem. And so it's an unlinear process that takes weeks to months. It's a big disaster, and it costs 90,000 local governments across the United States more than $5 billion a year themselves to manage these public records. And what they get for it, $500 million in lawsuit payouts, a 10% failure rate if you go by just the cash in, cash out method. And so clearly, the public records problem is a big problem to solve. So the gentleman before was talking about records retainment. He kind of flew by it, but it was an excellent point that he made. Takes weeks to months to process, saturated with risk, intensively manual and institutional knowledge. Now, I can just take this slide, and I bet that I could drop it into your industry, and your industry, and your industry, and this still makes sense in our industries. So I find that kind of interesting and really important. Today's solution, again, in the public space, every solution we're talking about, whether we're talking about grants, talk about public records, talk about housing, it comes down to it's too complex, which makes the solutions too fragile, which drives out the timelines for solutions. And the solution, of course, ultimately is disintermediation, which means get the points of failure out of processes and implement software like good AI into the processes where they make sense, and remove the moral hazard problem. So that's our solution. The future of AI, or the future of applied AI in governance, is building flexibility and not increasing fragility. So something there, I want to give you a framework and then answer questions. A framework for if you're interested in developing policy or developing AI that is going to work in a policy environment. If policy is going to impact you in your development of AI, and it will, if you're a developer, it's going to impact you, maybe not this year, but in 2, 3, 4, 5 years when the FTC and all the other regulatory agencies get involved, it's going to impact you. So one, understand the problem you're trying to solve. I would say that the problem that we're trying to solve at Inquisio, we spent 15 years trying to understand this problem, but it's no different in your industry. Know the technology that's going to work within an organization. I think that's something we're all wrestling with right now. Explore your existing market, and then products are better than ideas. The good idea floats around the room, lands on everybody's head. We've all had a million good ideas, but if we can turn those into products, we actually solve people's problems and make a big difference for them. And so some last thoughts, and then I know this is fast. It's kind of a speed session. Policy is a problem designed for AI. Policy is rules manifest. If this, then do that. If this, then do that. That's a great policy. But if we're not careful, policy will also be a problem created by AI. When AI is going to be utilized in developing policy, and we need to make sure that we're aware of the inherent challenges there. And if I had more time, we'd definitely go into that.